Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Wednesday, June the 9th, 2021. I don't know about you, but time is really moving right along. We are in an accelerated mode, and I'm not sure where we will end up. It doesn't take long for things to... Excuse us a minute. Okay, I'll start over again, okay? Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Wednesday, June the 9th, 2021. I don't know about you, but time is really moving right along. We are in an accelerated mode, and I'm not sure where we will end up. It doesn't take long for things to change in our lives. All I know is this. We must be diligent as we do work for the soon coming of the Lord. Our scripture is coming from the book of Ezekiel, chapters 40, 41, and 42. I will tell you right now, this is going to be a different trip from our other scriptures. I remember in the book of Numbers, we read every verse according to who beget who. And you know how meticulous that was. God believes in keeping records. He's very, very meticulous in what he's doing. Tonight we're going to read about the future temple that the Lord asked Ezekiel to describe for us. There is something that I believe is different from all of the other measurements and descriptions that God told Noah regarding the ark or Abraham about the tabernacle. You know, he would tell them how many pieces to cut and how long he wanted something. He would even tell them what kind of material he wanted them to use. So this is about the same way. Those events happened in the past and were given to people who were responsible for building them. Tonight is different, as I have already stated. There is the prophet Ezekiel, who is asked to describe the intricate details of what is yet to be built, but not by Ezekiel. He is transported by the Lord to a place where the next temple is to be built. His instructions are for us to look, hear, and set his heart for what is about to be shown to him. After that, he is told that he was brought to this place to show him what was to become, that he might declare what he has seen to the house of Israel. I'm having feedback, so this is what my problem is tonight, okay? Ezekiel is not responsible for building this great place. He is not even the one who is asked to take the measurements. Someone else has received that assignment. The scripture will read better than I have phrased it, okay? According to tradition, the Hebrew calendar started at the time of creation, which was placed at 3761 BC. The current 2020-2021 calendar and the Hebrew year is 5781. I found that interesting. That means that this is 219 years short of the Hebrew year 6000. Could this possibly mean that we have only 219 years before we enter the last 1,000-year period, which is called the millennial? I won't be alive then, but I expect to be raised from the dead sometimes along the way when this happens. Do you remember Genesis 1:31? And God saw that everything that he has made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And then in Genesis 2:1-2, and on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. 2 Peter 3:8 says, But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. Many transitional things will happen from here on out throughout the years. So don't be surprised. Whatever it is that happens, just know that our Maker is in charge. He's on the throne, and he knows what he's doing. There have been many temples in history that have been closely connected with the Jewish nation. I do have some YouTube recommendations for videos to those of you who would like to seek out more information and learn more about them. Please text me or email me. Some of these are wild, and then there are some that make sense. We had different ages when the first temple, we're going to talk tonight about Ezekiel and the third temple. But the first temple, King David had conquered Jerusalem. He declared the city capital of the Jewish kingdom as Jerusalem. And in 960 BC, David's son, King Solomon, builds the first Jewish temple. In 721, the Assyrians conquer Samaria, refugees flee to Jerusalem, and the city expands unto the western hill. In 701 BC, the Assyrian ruler Sennacherib lays siege to Jerusalem. 586, Babylonian forces destroy Jerusalem and demolish the first temple. That was during the Iron Age. We now come up to the Persian period, which is 539 through 322 before Christ. The Persian ruler Cyrus the Great conquers Babylonian Empire, including Jerusalem. Cyrus permits Jews in Babylonian exile to return to Jerusalem. The second temple was built. Nehemiah the prophet rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem, and the city was confined to the eastern hill. This was 445 to 425 BC. And I want you to know also that during this period, Zerubbabel was the mayor of Jerusalem at the time, or the ruler. And a lot of times when they do attribute the second temple to Zerubbabel. I wasn't quite sure where to put him, but that's exactly where he belongs. There's also the Herodian period. King Herod reconstructs the second temple. He adds retaining walls to that temple. In 30, after Christ is born, Jesus is crucified by the Romans in Jerusalem. The Roman period is from 70 to 324 after the birth of Christ. Roman forces destroyed Jerusalem and demolished the second temple. Then Jerusalem is rebuilt as a Roman city. So the Romans took over Jerusalem during that time. So I would say in the first 300-400 years after Christ was born, that belonged to the Roman Empire. And we know about Caesar. The second temple, the book of Ezra, begins with Cyrus the Great entrusting the temple vessels to Shabazar, who is probably one of the names of Zerubbabel. And both were called governors of Judah, and both were credited with laying the foundation of the temple. A number of explanations have been proposed, including this, that the two names were the same person. Shazabbar was in fact Shenazar, Zerubbabel's uncle, is mentioned in the books of Chronicles. Shazabbar began the work and Zerubbabel finished it. That's another theory that they have. With the third temple, in his commentary, John B. Taylor listed 4 different interpretive approaches to these chapters. See, the chapters that we're going to read tonight, they are all about building the third temple. They're very intricate in that they are specific as to what Ezekiel is looking at. When we go into this, I'm going to try to explain what I'm thinking while I'm reading it, so you pray for me tonight. But there were 4 different aspects of looking at the meaning of the third temple. I looked on I looked on the internet. And when you're looking at the internet, there are actual people living today talking about building the third temple. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think so. But someone is going to attempt to build the third temple. Okay? So I'm just telling you that. I'm not making any accusations or anything, but there's a lot of talk about it's time to build the temple. Just do some research on the internet, all right? But there were 4 different ways of looking at it. There's this literal, when you're reading these scriptures, you can take it literally if you want to. It says that in these chapters, Ezekiel describes a temple that he expected would be built by the returning exiles in their restoration to the land. These are commentators that are talking. For example, Adam Clarke believed that Ezekiel simply gave the plan of Solomon's temple from memory and set it here as an encouragement to the exiles that they would in fact be restored to Jerusalem and the temple would be rebuilt. There's also a symbolic Christian viewpoint. It describes the Christian church. Smith described this perspective. The best approach is to see these chapters as illustrative of spiritual truths. The main points thus symbolized in these chapters are these. God would provide for his people a temple, a priesthood, and a worship system related to, but different from, that which they had formerly known. A united people, including Gentiles, would occupy the inheritance which God had promised to their forefathers. That's called the symbolic Christian. They're saying that this third temple is discussed in these verses as a symbol of what is yet to come. The dispensationalists, they describe a temple of features of a coming millennial age. And I know that in our church we say that we're living in the grace dispensation. I'm not sure if that could be related to some of this or not, but here's the explanation for the dispensationalist view of the temple. They describe a temple of features of a coming millennial age. This future temple belongs not so much to the eternal age as in Revelation 21:22, but to the period of a literal 1,000-year period of Jesus over this earth, especially for the Jewish people in the millennium. Ezekiel's temple will remember and memorialize God's gracious work for Israel and the rich types and ceremonies that looked forward to the perfect work of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. This view declares that the prediction speaks of the restoration and establishment of the people of Israel in their own land in the last days of their national history. Their conversion to the Lord through faith in their long rejected Messiah, and the manifest presence and glory of the Lord in their midst. And this was by commentator Feinberg. There's also an apocalyptic version, which presents symbolic and fantastic images of a coming age, connected to images and ideas popular in the pagan world of that day. Chapters 40 to 48 replace the conventional prophecies of chapters 33 through 37 with imagery that is primarily mythic. The prophet chooses to speak about Jerusalem's future by recasting imagery deriving from the ancient Near Eastern mythic motif of the cosmic mountain. And this is by commentators Walter and Hoppe. This commentary will examine these chapters primarily under the dispensational framework. The reader must decide to favor a more literal approach or a more figurative or spiritual approach. Though there are things to be said for and against each approach, in the author's opinion, the best approach is to regard the temple as real, yet to be fulfilled in the future phase of God's unfolding plan of the ages. The fundamental weakness in a lot of them is that it has not been fulfilled. The temple was rebuilt in the days of Ezra, and Zerubbabel did not answer to this description. And the other temple that Solomon built does not answer to this same description. The message is that the temple is real. It is not metaphorical. It's a visionary and yet future, but it is real. So as we are describing it tonight, just remember, this is the Lord talking to Ezekiel, giving him a vision. There's also a person with Ezekiel that has not introduced himself to Ezekiel. He doesn't know who he is, never seen him before, but he is following the instructions of the Lord. Okay? It's just a fantastic chapters, and I don't understand half of it yet. Well, I don't understand a tenth of it. I'm going to read it to you tonight and hope and pray that you will stick with it and do some more research on it, okay? But the summary is the measuring of the courts of the new temple. There's some measuring going on. You got to measure it out. The land where the new temple is going to go, according to research that has been done, there is not a space near or in Jerusalem that is equivalent to the size of what is measured out for the temple that is to be built. Okay? So they're saying that there's probably going to be earthquakes, there's going to be other different things that's going to take place that will shift the ground to the point that it becomes flat enough for this facility to be erected upon this particular land. But it will take place over in the Holy Lands. Okay? Ezekiel is taken to Jerusalem in a vision. The man with a measuring rod assists. The man with the measuring rod speaks to Ezekiel. The outer court of the new temple is talked about, the wall outside the temple, the eastern gateway, the entrance to the eastern gateway, the pavement of the outer court, the northern gateway, the southern gateway, the inner court of the new temple, the gateways of the inner court, the chambers for sacrifices, the chambers for the singers and the priests, measuring the inner court and its passage. Some of these things, as I listened or read this, I was thinking there's an eastern gate, there's a northern gate, there's a southern gate, but there is no western gate. And that's because the main building is perched closer to the western gate, which is totally closed off. There's no way out of the western side of this beautiful city that is going to be erected, or this temple. Okay? So we're going to be in just 1 minute here. I've got one more to talk about. It says the final great vision of Ezekiel is recorded in chapters 40 through 48. It is almost the last prophecy dated and many years after the fall of Jerusalem. It's not clear if Ezekiel intended the civil war or the religious calendar of Israel. If it was the religious calendar, then it was the day on Israel's calendar when they were to begin preparation for the Passover, which is 10 Nisan. Ezekiel insisted the source of this extended prophecy was God. Yahweh was the source of its minute and sometimes strange detail. We're not told the name of the mountain, but from the description that follows, we gather that Ezekiel could, in his vision, see Jerusalem. The vision of the temple unfolding in the following chapters really was something like a city. It was large and surrounding by massive walls, just as an ancient city. As Yahweh led Ezekiel to Jerusalem, he also appointed a guide for the prophet. This man was likely an angelic being, indicated by his radiant appearance, which was bronze. Some regard him as the angel of the Lord, but this is not specifically stated. The angelic being had 2 instruments for measuring. One was some kind of rope or string, and the other was a solid rod. The supernatural guide was waiting for Ezekiel. Look with your eyes and hear with your ears and fix your mind on everything. The radiant man told Ezekiel to focus his senses, paying close attention. If the description of the temple that follows were merely spiritual or symbolic, there would be no need to so carefully note the details. Ezekiel is to concentrate on what the guide is about to show him. After all, he is not simply a tourist visiting an historical site or even a worshiper on a pilgrimage to a shrine. He is a mediator of divine revelation, and that's by commentator Block. Ezekiel chapter 40. This is the longest of the chapters, okay? So bear with me. And it's about the vision of a man with a measuring rod. In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was smitten, in the selfsame day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and brought me thither. In visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel, and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. And he brought me thither, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee. For to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought thither. Declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. So this is the tongue tangler that I was trying to do earlier tonight. This man told him, look with your eyes, hear with your ears, set your heart upon all that I'm going to show you, to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither. So the reason that we brought you here, Ezekiel, is that you would look and hear and pay attention to all of the things that you're going to see. That's the reason that we brought you here. But the main reason, after you have been so attentive and so careful to take note of all these details, I want you to then go back and declare all that you saw to the house of Israel. You don't hear him saying to the house of Israel and Judea. They are no longer two houses. You remember we talked last week? The house of Israel and the house of Judea. Judea being ruled by Rehoboam, I think, by Jeroboam, and then Rehoboam was leading the house of Israel. That is no longer happening. The king has come. The king has taken his rightful place in position and has joined the two houses together as one. That's only in the 4 verses of the 40th chapter. Okay? So now, the 5th verse, and behold a wall on the outside of the house round about. He said, now there's going to be a wall on the outside of the house round about. He's telling him these things. And in the man's hand, a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by the cubit and a handbreadth. So he measured the breadth of the building, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. So that's the same. However long that was, that's what it was. They measured it. The height of the building was 1 reed, and the breadth of the building was 1 reed. I looked through all of the measurements, but I really could not remember all of them at one time, okay? So forgive me for that. I'll give you some more details next week. Verse 6, he says, then he came unto the gate which looketh toward the east, and went up the stairs thereof, and measured the threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad, and the other threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad. And every little chamber was 1 reed long, 1 reed broad, and between the little chambers were 5 cubits, and the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate within was 1 reed. So they were the same distance, the width and the breadth and all of that. They were humongous. Let's put it that way. He measured, I don't even know where I am now, but I think I'm at 8. He measured also the porch of the gate within 1 reed. Then measured he the porch of the gate 8 cubits, and the post thereof 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was inward. And the little chambers, verse 10, of the gate eastward were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. They 3 were of 1 measure, and the posts had 1 measure on this side and on that side. What that is saying is God was specific. He wanted everything. He wanted symmetry in what he was doing, and what he did on the left side, he did on the right side, and these posts were tall. Okay? And he measured the breadth of the entry of the gate, 10 cubits, and the length of the gate, 13 cubits. The space also before the little chambers was 1 cubit on this side, and the space was 1 cubit on that side. And the little chambers were 6 cubits on this side and 6 cubits on that side. Around the edge of the gate, there, the fence that was there where they had the 1 reed up and the 1 reed across, there was a wall there. So then they had the doors there. And as they were doing those doors, they were fixing them. There were little chambers or little rooms all along the inner court, inside of the gates. And people actually, I guess, were going to be able to live there. He said he measured the gate, then the gate from the roof of one little chamber to the roof of another. The breadth was 25 cubits, door against door. He made also posts of 80 cubits, even unto the post of the court round about the gate. And from the face of the gate of the entrance unto the face of the porch of the inner gate were 50 cubits. He's the angel that's accompanying Ezekiel. He's doing the measuring. Ezekiel is literally seeing what the new temple will look like. It's as if it's real. And there in verse 16, he says, there were narrow windows to the little chambers, and to their posts within the gate round about, and likewise to the arches, and windows were round about inward, and upon each post were palm trees. Now, I saw one version where they had pictures of palm trees painted on each post. I saw another one where the posts were designed for the top to stretch out like the palm tree, which was able to hold up the foundation of whatever it was on top of it. So the entire post looked like a palm tree that was reaching forward. And I thought that was just wonderful. It was so beautiful. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm telling you, saints, God is getting some things in order. Verse 17, it says, then brought he me into the outward court. So the man brought him into the outward court, and lo, there were chambers. Chambers are the little buildings that were all around, encamped all around there. There was a specific building for a specific occupation. There was a place for the singers to stay. There was a place for the priests to stay. There was a place for the cooks to stay. I've never seen nothing like it. I don't know what the imagination of man is, but I'm telling you, some of these people that drew these depictions and these models of what Ezekiel said, one woman said she's been working on this plan for 30 years, and she only did exactly what each scripture told her to do. And it's just a beautiful edifice. So unified. It's awesome. And it says here, I'm going to go back up to 18. And the pavement by the side of the gates over against the length of the gates was the lower pavement. So you got a lower level and an upper level. Then he measured the breadth from the forefront of the lower gate unto the forefront of the inner court without. So on the outside of the inner court. 100 cubits eastward and northward. Verse 20. And the gate of the outward court that looked toward the north, he measured the length thereof and the breadth thereof. And the little chambers thereof were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. And the posts thereof and the arches thereof were after the measure of the first gate. The length thereof was 50 cubits and the breadth 25 cubits. It's almost like if you built one of the chambers, then you could build a couple more because they had the exact same measurements. This, to me, is I know that they say during the 1,000-year reign that all of God's people are going to be together. I do believe he's preparing a place just for them. And I'm telling you, it's just phenomenal. I know you can't see what I'm seeing right now, but if you would read this, if you would just take time to look at some of the videos, you will be able to visualize what I'm talking about tonight. I couldn't have video. I'm not that savvy. I can't put stuff up on the screen for you to see. But one of these days, maybe we'll get somebody savvy enough to do that. But this is this is something that is absolutely important for us. This world is a mess. This world is in turmoil. And we really believe that we are in control of how to settle everything down. There is no peace. The devil just is not going to let people make peace with each other. He's roaming around. He's doing everything he can do to get us all in trouble. And that's his job. He knows that he doesn't have many more days left. He's frantic and he's really on top of everything. So be careful out there. It says in verse 20, I'm going to read that and then I'm going to be quiet if I can. And the gate of the outward court that looked toward the north, he measured the length thereof and the breadth thereof. Now when he says he measured, he's talking about the angelic figure that was with him. And the little chambers thereof were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. And the posts thereof and the arches thereof were after the measure of the first gate. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth 25 cubits. And their windows and their arches and their palm trees. I literally thought it was palm trees. And it may be, I don't know. Were after the measure of the gate that looked toward the east, and they went up unto it by 7 steps. And the arch thereof were before them. And the gate of the inner court was over against the gate toward the north and toward the east, and he measured from gate to gate 100 cubits. Now, cubits are larger than feet, okay? A football field, I think, is 100 feet. No? How many? 1,000. It's 1,000 feet. 100 yards. 100 yards. Okay, so it's 3 feet. So it's 100 yards. But these measurements, I'm not too good with measurements, okay? You know that now. But these measurements, when you take and look at these auditoriums, I was looking today, there was some tennis matches, and one of these tennis auditoriums, they have these sliding roof that buckle up and you can bring it back and close up the building. And I said, oh God, I said, they're building all kind of monumental things around here all over the place. But it's just so easy for an earthquake to come or something or whatever. And my kids don't like for me to talk, doom talk. They tell me to stop and get out the dark, and come in the light. So I'm going to come back in the light here. But the Lord is letting us know from 40 to 48, I believe, to the end of this chapter, God is telling us in Ezekiel what it's going to be like. When we get to Daniel, a lot of those things that Daniel's talking about is going to coincide with what Ezekiel is talking about. But you know, in the first 32 chapters of Ezekiel, God was telling them what he was mad about. He was telling them, I'm mad about this, I'm mad about that. I want you guys to straighten up. I want you to do right. I want to do this, do that. And if you don't, I'm going to destroy everything. And he did. He destroyed everything. And he will again, is coming. That destruction is going to happen. But as I'm reading this, what it's letting me know is that God is in control of all of this. And even though it has not been built yet, it will. And there are many men and other people out here who say that it's time for us to build the building. You got no idea the concept of what God has written in this chapter. You don't know diddly about his future, how can I say it, place of refuge for us, okay? Or for whoever he has planned. But the children of Israel, they're number one on his agenda, okay? And we need to understand that we are grafted in as Gentiles. I'm so grateful that during my lifetime, I found the Lord when I was young. I don't know nothing about what he plans and all of these things. As I'm going into these scriptures, I've read these scriptures before. They didn't mean anything to me. They were just words on a page. These words are coming to life. These words are real. We need to take time. What did the man tell Ezekiel to do? He said, look. He said, put your whole heart in what you're doing. Don't deviate. You're going to have the ability to share with others what I have placed in your sight and what you have heard me say. So be careful with your eyes and make sure that you hear the right things and you're able to display those or to give them out to others. God really wants us to be soldiers in his kingdom. Verse 28, and he brought me to the inner court by the south gate, and he's measured the south gate according to these measures, and the little chambers thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof, according to these measures, and they were windows. There were windows in it, and in the arches thereof round about it. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits broad. Some of the things that I saw when you enter into the gate, there were nothing but glass walls from the bottom all the way up to the top. And they were separated by these palm columns. And it's just absolutely, just take a look on there and see, just look for the third temple, okay? And the little chambers thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches, and according to the measures. I know I'm rereading this, okay? And there were windows in it, and the arches thereof round about it. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits broad. And the arches round about were 25 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outer court, and the palm trees were upon the posts thereof, and the going up to it had 8 steps. You guys are messing me up tonight. Verse 32, and he brought me into the inner court toward the east, and he measured the gate according to these measures, and the little chambers thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof were according to these measures, and there were windows therein, and in the arches thereof round about it, it was 50 cubits long, and 25 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outer court, and palm trees were upon the posts thereof, on this side and on that side. And the going up to it had 8 steps. Verse 35, and he brought me to the north gate, and measured it according to these measures. The little chambers thereof, the posts thereof, and the arches thereof, and the windows to it round about, the length was 50 cubits, and the breadth 25 cubits. And the posts thereof were toward the utter court, and palm trees were upon the posts thereof on the side, this side and on that side, and the going up to it had 8 steps. There's something about those 8 steps. They keep coming. And the chambers, verse 38, and the entries thereof were by the posts of the gates, where they washed the burnt offering. And the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side, to slay thereon the burnt offering and the sin offering and the trespass offering. At the side without, as one goeth up to the entry of the north gate, were the 2 tables, and on the other side, which was at the porch of the gate, were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side, and 4 tables on that side. By the side of the gate, 8 tables, whereon they slew their sacrifices. And 4 tables whereof hewn stone for the burnt offering, of 1.5 cubits long, and 1.5 cubits broad, and 1 cubit high, whereupon also they laid the instruments wherewith they slew the burnt offering and the sacrifice. And within there were hooks 1 hand broad. It's 1 hand broad, okay? Fastened round about and upon the tables of the flesh of the offering. Now you might ask yourself, if we're going to be in a perfect place and there's no more sin, what's the purpose of the burnt offerings and the sin offerings? And what's the purpose of the sacrifices and all of that? You see, when they did it back in the old days, they would do it and then go out and sin again. They just kept it up. Maybe this might be something that they would do as a reminder of what they were supposed to be doing in the first place. Now, we know that we don't need the sin offering once you get to that heavenly place, because Jesus Christ is right there in the main building sitting on the throne. That's something to think about. So you've got him right there, and you are milling around and going about your business, doing your duties or whatever the case may be. My mind is just going with me right now. But you're just going around doing what you're doing. If I'm a cook, I'm going to be in the kitchen cooking. If I'm going to be a singer, which I doubt that very seriously, then I'm going to be in the singers' quarters. All those that have the same occupations are going to be together. The priests, do you know how intricate that is, the instructions that they gave? The priests are going to, well, I haven't gotten there yet. Maybe I should just read there. But the priests are going to be wearing clothes, certain clothes for making presentations to the Lord. And there's some things they can wear inside the quarters, and they have to pull those clothes off when they are worshiping, and they have to pull those clothes off and put other clothes on before they go outside. That's how particular it is. It's kind of like when you got a set of clothes that you wear when you go to work, and there's a set that you go when you're working, you got your work clothes on. Some people will change clothes at their workplace and put on their walking clothes or going home clothes because they don't plan to, they plan to stop or whatever. But this is just amazing how detailed oriented these scriptures are. If you just took 5 of them and tried to study them and do some research on them, you'd be there a pretty long time trying to figure it all out, okay? He said here, with the 4 tables, they were hewn stone burnt offerings. Within were hooks, a hand broad fastened round about, and upon the tables was the flesh of the offering. That is, I'm on 44 now. And without the inner gate, that's on the outside of the inner gate. When you say without, we're on the outside of the inner gate. There were chambers of the singers in the inner court, which was at the side of the north gate, and their prospect was toward the south. One at the side of the east gate, having the prospect toward the north. I don't understand what prospect means, but it seems like the singers will be on one side of the gate, but what they're going to be doing is going to be pointed at some other side of the gate. He said unto me, this chamber, whose prospect is toward the south, I guess is turned toward the south, I'm not sure, is for the priests, for keepers of the charge of the house. And the chambers whose prospect is toward the north is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok among the sons of Levi, which come near to the Lord to minister unto him. Did y'all hear that? He's got a certain group that's going to come and minister unto him. And he's got some of them are keepers of the charge of the house, and some are the keepers of the charge of the altar. Duties are already announced, okay? I heard somewhere in scripture that people are going to be princes and princes, prince and princess, and all of this kind of stuff. It just sounds exciting to me. Verse 47. So he measured the court 100 cubits long and 100 cubits broad, 4 square, and the altar that was before the house. And he brought me to the porch of the house and measured each post of the porch, 5 cubits on this side, 5 cubits on that side, and the breadth of the gate was 3 cubits on this side and 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits and the breadth 11 cubits. And he brought me by the steps whereby they went up to it, and there were pillars by the posts, one on this side and another on that side. This is the end of chapter 40. We're continuing with chapter 41, and we're continuing to measure the new temple. The temple in general. The dimensions of the sanctuary will be discussed. the walls of the temple with their chambers, the building to the west of the temple, features of the temple building as a whole, designs on the temple building, the table before the Lord, the doors of the temple. Okay? Chapter 41, verse 1, the inner temple. The inner temple, let me tell you something about that. You know, back in the day, the priests were the ones that had to go back there, and they wore this robe, and they had to put little pomegranates at the bottom, the bottom of the robe, and they had to tie a rope on it so that as long as you heard the pomegranates knocking against each other, you knew the priests were alive because they had a pure heart. You know, we had the Ark of the Covenant in that same facility or that location, and there were we had the place where you did the communion stuff was set up in that particular place. I just read it and I can't remember what in the inner court of the tabernacle. That's what I'm trying to say. So all of the furniture and everything was set up in there. You know what? They're not even going to have the veil was rent when Jesus was crucified, and when he died on the cross, the veil was rent. There's no veil now. Jesus is in there, but there's no veil. Jesus is in the inner court, but there's no veil. It says afterward he brought me to the temple and measured the posts, 6 cubits broad on the one side and 6 cubits broad on the other side, which was the breadth of the tabernacle. And the breadth of the door was 10 cubits, and the sides of the door were 5 cubits on one side and 5 cubits on the other side. That's about 18, some people would say 20, some people say 24 inches, okay? But when you're talking about 5 cubits, you're talking about 5 times that number, okay? And he measured the length thereof 40 cubits and the breadth 20 cubits. He did not spare material, all right? Verse 3, then he went inward and measured the post of the door 2 cubits, and the door 6 cubits, and the breadth of the door 7 cubits. So he measured the length thereof 20 cubits, and the breadth 20 cubits, before the temple. And he said unto me, this is the most holy place. Number 5, after he measured the wall of the house 6 cubits, and the breadth of every side chamber 4 cubits, round about the house on every side, and the side chambers were 3, one over another, and 30 in order, and they entered into the wall which was of the house for the side chamber round about, that they might have hold, but they had not hold in the wall of the house. I'm not sure what that means, but that's a good verse for assignment. Chapter 41, and that's verse 6, okay? Verse 7, there was an enlarging and a winding about still upward to the side chambers, for the winding about of the house went still upward round about the house. Therefore the breadth of the house was still upward, and so increased from the lowest chamber to the highest by the midst. I saw also the height of the house round about. The foundations of the side chambers were a full reed of 6 great cubits. They're talking about how large it is, how wide it is, how deep it is. The thickness of the wall, which was the side chamber without, was 5 cubits, and that which was left was the place of the side chambers that were within. And between the chambers was the wideness of 20 cubits round about the house on every side. And the doors of the side chambers were toward the place that was left, one door toward the north and another door toward the south, and the breadth of the place that was left was 5 cubits round about. Verse 12. Now the building that was before the separate place at the end toward the west was 70 cubits broad, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick round about, and the length thereof 90 cubits. I don't know how a prophet could memorize all of this stuff. He didn't have his script writer with him, but yet he documented all of the things that was told to him. Verse 13, so he measured the house, 100 cubits long, and the separate place, and the building, with the walls thereof, 100 cubits long. Also the breadth of the face of the house, and of the separate place toward the east, 100 cubits. And he measured the length of the building over against the separate place which was behind it, and the galleries thereof on the one side, and on the other side 100 cubits, with the inner temple and the porches of the court. Another thing about this particular temple, there is no mourning place for the, you remember how they had an inner, outside the inner court, they had another court where the public was open and they could go out and sit on there and chat and all of that. That's not provided in this new temple. I'm still thinking this is the 1,000-year temple that is being discussed. I may be wrong. I don't mind being wrong, but that's just coming to me as we're reading this. It says, I hope I didn't miss a verse here. I'll just do 16 just in case, okay? The doorpost and the narrow windows and the galleries round about on their 3 stories, over against the door, sealed with wood round about, and from the ground up to the windows, and the windows were covered. To that above the door, even unto the inner house and without, and by all the wall round about within and without by measure. Everything was measured. And it was made with cherubims and palm trees, so that a palm tree was between a cherub and a cherub. And every cherub had 2 faces, so that the face of a man was toward the palm tree on the one side, and the face of the young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. It was made through all the house round about. From the ground unto above the door were cherubims and palm trees made, and on the wall of the temple. These are, you know, these monuments that are built up, and they have the face of the lion on it and things like that. So on one side it had a face. On the other side it had had the face of a man on one side and a young lion on the other side. These were built up in the courts. You got them on these sides. As you're going down, you're seeing them through the court. It's amazing. 21. The posts of the temple were squared, and the face of the sanctuary, the appearance of the one as the appearance of the other. So one looked just like the other. They were identical. The altar of wood was 3 cubits high, and the length thereof 2 cubits, and the corners thereof, and the length thereof, and the walls thereof were of wood. And he said unto me, This is the table that is before the Lord. And the temple and the sanctuary had 2 doors. 24. And the doors had 2 leaves apiece, 2 turning leaves, 2 leaves, one for the one door, and 2 leaves for the other door. And there were made on them, on the doors of the temple, cherubims and palm trees, like as were made upon the walls. And there were thick planks upon the face of the porch without. And there were narrow windows and palm trees on the one side and on the other side, on the sides of the porch and upon the side chambers of the house, and thick planks. That's the end of chapter 41. But do you know what Jesus rode on the donkey in when during Easter time? I think that's the right time. Before he was crucified, I believe it was. He rode in on a donkey, and they had palm leaves out there that he came in on. So there's something about the palm trees. Chapter 42, very short chapter. Chambers for the priests. There's specific information about where the priests will reside and what they will be doing. There's an upper and lower chamber. They have access to those chambers. There's holy chambers to the north and south, outer dimensions of the new temple, the measure on each side. After the general tour through the temple complex, the radiant guide finished with an overall perspective of the temple complex. It had the same measurements on each side. In other words, the radiant guide was the one that led Ezekiel through this vision. It says almost 1 square mile and about 633 acres. The entire area was much too large for Mount Moriah. This is a commentary. Where Solomon's and Zerubbabel's temple stood. The scheme requires a great change in the topography of the land, which will occur as indicated in Zechariah 14, 9 through 11, the very time which Ezekiel had in view, and that's by commentator Feinberg. Some argue that an area 500 rods square would be too large and not fit the topography well, but such an argument is not I'm sorry. But such argue that an area of 500 rods square would be too large and not fit the topography well. But such an argument is not persuasive when Zechariah and the other prophets demonstrate that the whole Palestinian topography will undergo geographical modifications at the beginning of the millennium. No good reasons appear to reject the term rod in these verses. Alexander is the commentator. It will not have a court of the Gentiles with the all-important separating wall, nor will it have a separate court of the women. In the millennial temple, our Lord's desire will be fulfilled, that his house be a house of prayer for men and women of all nations. That's Warren Wiersbe. The purpose of the wall. Ezekiel chapter 42, we have a few verses here, chamber of the temple. Then he brought me forth into the utter court, the way toward the north, and he brought me into the chamber that was over against the separate place, and which was before the building toward the north. Before the length of 100 cubits was the north door, and the breadth was 50 cubits. Over against the 20 cubits which were for the inner court, and over against the pavement, which was for the utter court, was gallery against gallery in 3 stories. I think gallery indicates houses or housing units. And before the chambers was a walk to 10 cubits breadth inward, one way of 1 cubit, and the doors toward their doors toward the north. Now the upper chambers were shorter, for the galleries were higher than the lower, and than the middlemost of the building. For they were in 3 stories, but had not pillars as the pillars of the courts. Therefore the building was straitened more than the lowest and the middlemost from the ground. And the wall that was without over against the chambers toward the outer court of the forepart of the chambers, the length thereof was 50 cubits. For the length of the chambers that were in the outer court was 50 cubits, and lo, before temple were 100 cubits. And from under these chambers was the entry on the east side, as one goeth into them from the utter court. The chambers were in thickness of the wall of the court toward the east, over against the separate place, and over against the building. And the way before them was like the appearance of the chambers which were toward the north, as long as they, and as broad as they, and all their goings out were both according to their fashions and according to their doors. And according to the doors of the chambers that were toward the south was a door in the head of the way, even the way directly before the wall toward the east, as one entereth into them. Then said he unto me, the north chambers and the south chambers, which are before the separate place, they be holy chambers, where the priests that approach unto the Lord shall eat the most holy things. There shall they lay the most holy things. and the meat offering, and the sin offering, and the trespass offering, for the place is holy. When their priests enter therein, then shall they not go out of the holy place into the utter court, but there shall they lay their garments within wherein they minister, for they are holy, and shall put on other garments, and shall approach to those things which are for the people. So the things that the garments that they use to worship in, they don't go outside. They stay. You change. When you're going to minister to the people, you have on something else. That's causing it not to be defiled, I think. But that's something that the Lord put down and told Ezekiel to tell us about. Ezekiel is a very complex person. I don't understand most of the stuff that he was talking about or that he did, but my eyes have been opened just a little bit, and I'm praying that I can get more vision and more understanding so that I can share it with you, because there's a lot of different ideas out there. There's a lot of different commentaries that tell you things that it doesn't fit your spirit. You don't want to use. But tonight, I hope and pray that you got a little drift of the temple. Don't know who's going to be there. Don't know when it's going to be, but it's yet to come. Some people think that they're going to build it themselves, but most of the time, if you're building a house, you have say-so over where you want your kitchen, where you want your living room, where you want your dining room, what you want in your bedroom. But this is not our house. Someone else is building it for us. That's a beautiful thought. He's working on the building. Next week, the Lord willing, we will continue Bible study in the book of Ezekiel, beginning with chapter 43. I give thanks to the Lord for providing us with vaccinations to safeguard us from the spread of COVID. And I pray that we take the vaccination. I give thanks to the Lord. Some people, I just think about that. I'm not going to comment on it, but just think about it. I have to wear glasses, okay? I give thanks to the Lord for the relief that He's given to us in this world's pandemic situation. I pray for safety precautions as we prepare for our return to our church services soon. I pray for all the families who have lost their loved ones through COVID-19, through sickness, through gun violence on our streets, and through war-torn zones in our world. I pray for the power of God to flow through His children as we rid this world of hate, as He rids this world of hatred. I pray for people all over the world to know God through His Holy Spirit as they receive His great salvation. I pray for God to touch, bless, lead, and guide our leaders in America. And please, God, heal our land and heal our sorrow. I thank God for His grace and His mercy. To those of you who stayed with me, thank you very much. I hope to see you next week. God bless you all, and good night, everyone.